Hey team, it's Les. Thanks for joining me today for another edition of CHOT Teachable Moments. We continue today in the experience, a series about how to positively affect quality scores and deliver superior care. This is about the CAHPS survey, right? So we're going through question by question through the CAHPS survey and talking about ways that we can positively affect those scores. So the next question we're talking about, the question of today is question 25 on that survey, and that says, while your family member was in hospice care, how often did the hospice team listen carefully to you? And their options for answers are never, sometimes, usually, and always. And we want that answer to be always. That's the answer we actually get credit for. We don't get credit for sometimes or usually. And obviously, we get a negative credit for if they say never. So, what are some ways that we can affect that? Well, really, what this is asking about is active listening, right? And our active listening skills, and whether the perception of our care by that caregiver that's answering the survey. Remember, after the patient's already died, they're getting the survey 6 to 8 weeks later, and they're being asked to remember back while your family member was on hospice. When you spoke to the hospice team, how often did they listen carefully? Not just listen, not just hear you, listen carefully. Really, so this is about active listening. So, what are some ways we can affect that? First, pause and be present. And what do we mean by that? Pause and be present. What we mean is actually slowing down, taking your time, making eye contact, showing that caregiver that as you're speaking to them, that we are paying close attention. Because even a few seconds of undivided attention goes a long way and makes a big impact. The next tip is reflect and confirm. And what do we mean by that? Well, it's actually echoing back. This is another part of active listening, right? Echoing back what you heard to confirm, right? So reflecting that statement back to confirm the information they gave us. So it might look something like this. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're concerned about mom's breathing. Is that right? Just a quick, easy, reflective statement to put the ball back in their court when they're communicating with us, right? Again, part of active listening is reflecting those statements back to make sure that we're gaining full understanding. That's a huge part of active listening, and it affects the perception that they are being heard, that we're reflecting back what we heard to ensure that the communication is accurate. Doing this not only shows that we have understood, but that we value what they're saying. And then finally, follow up. So, active listening doesn't end after we have that initial conversation. Usually, we've taken away nuggets, right, to follow up on. So, we need to circle back around to those caregivers to make sure that they understand that we heard them, we were doing our active listening, that they gave us information to follow up on, and that we're circling back around. Even if we don't have the answer right then, maybe a couple days later, the next day, that we're giving them a call or text, some kind of communication, that we're still following up on that issue that was brought up and we haven't forgotten about it. Closing the loop becomes a huge part of communication. And families remember when we do that. More importantly, they remember when we don't. So let's make sure we're closing that loop. So, those are just a few ways that we can impact this particular question. Let's jump into fruits of your labor. These are the comments that we receive on those surveys, and we break those down and give you one comment from each site every time we do one of these. So let's start with Waco. Waco, we got a comment back that says, "Thank you, Steve, for the excellent education provided on hospice care and our loved one's condition. We knew we were making the right decision, and he explained things so well. Thank you, Kay, for the loving care she provided our loved one after they admitted and until they passed peacefully. You both are angels, and we can't thank you enough." So kudos to Steve and Kay. Kudos to the entire Waco team. Well done. The next comment comes from Fort Worth. "Once we knew my husband could not survive without life support, we had to make the final difficult decision. Deborah Hefner was wonderful. She gave us all kinds of information and support. Her guidance and emotional support made a horrible time for us a little easier thanks to her." Well done, Deb Hefner, there at Harris HEB. Well done to the Fort Worth team. Cleburne, Chad Aiden was the person who explained the program and signed us up. He was most helpful and answered all our questions. I appreciated him so much. Well done, Chad. Well done. Kudos to the Cleburne team. And then finally, Hospice House at Hughley. The experience and team at the Burleson facility were exceptional. I refer to you always whenever I speak of my husband's last days in hospice. Thank you for making those days blessed and loving for him and for me. Kudos to a hospice house at Hughley. Well done. Thank you all for everything you do every day for our patients, our facility partners, our caregivers and families, and for one another. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.